Welcome to the Sweet Science of Fighting podcast. Today, Stephen Cheney. Is that Cheney? Is that how you say your last name?
Cheney. Yeah.
Cheney. Perfect. Welcome. It's good to have you on, and kind of got introduced by a mutual friend, Seneca, I guess from the sword fighting world. So, do you want to maybe just give a brief background about yourself, Stephen? Kind of, I guess, what are you currently doing within the world of sword fighting and combat sports, and then maybe just a little bit of how you came around and how long you've been using and implementing a constraints-led approach to your training.
Sure. So I started martial arts in 2008, and I started with kendo. I also did a little bit of modern Olympic fencing, but kendo was really my main game, which I practiced for a while. So I'm fourth dan is my rank in that. I was pretty, well bought into the kind of the kendo training methodology and the mindset, which is very traditional in its approach. Probably pretty familiar to many other Japanese martial arts. You do like static drilling, and then there was a lot of sparring though, which is good. Yeah. I started the Longsword. So HEMA, if your audience has heard of it, historical European martial arts. So Longsword is kind of the most popular um, you know activity under the HEMA umbrella. So I started that in 2015, and I continue that to this day. I started my club, Bucks Historical Longsword, in 2016, and we up until the pandemic, we had our last class in March 2020, and up until that point, our last class before the pandemic, up until that point, I basically modeled our class design around kendo. So again, that very traditional learning style of, we're going to do these set drills. This is, we're going to look at these little details of all your actions, and we're going to, pare it down to exactly what we think is the best, and then and only then can you really use it in sparring. So that's this is kind of where the second part of your question begins, the CLA. So we started using the constraints-led approach when we started up after the pandemic, and it was really that break. So we started up again in May of 2021. And it was really that long break of over a year that that kind of facilitated the transition, because up until then, leading classes, I was also at the time doing judo and kendo, so I kind of had a full schedule, and I'm like, coming up with this week's class was kind of all that I could really handle doing. Like, there was no way that I was going to be able to do a full overhaul of our training methodology during that time, because yeah. But having the break and reading a bunch of books and talking to people kind of enabled that to happen. So we've been doing CLA at my club ever since then. Basically games-based learning with other other ecological methodologies mixed in, and yeah, it's been working great. I really see it being able to compare the two, like the pre-pandemic traditional style versus the post-pandemic CLA style. It's really a huge difference. I see people getting proficient a lot faster, and really a important aspect of this for me, because I'm also still a practitioner, is fun. So people are a lot more fun to fight against, right? Because they're more creative. They do like more interesting things. It's just more fun.
For listeners like myself who don't know much about longsword fighting, just to give a background, I think it will help when we go into maybe some of the examples you have there. Kind of, do you want to just quickly break down some of the rules of and how the matches work and things like that?
Sure. Well, first of all, uh, so this is what we use. So it's sword in two hands. It's fairly long. This is 53 inches long is like kind of the standard length of these. Um, they've got some weight to them. They're about 2.5 pounds. Um, and the most basic goal is hit the other person with the blade, uh, ideally without getting hit yourself. There's no standard rule set in longsword. It kind of varies by event. Um, but by and large, if you're hitting the other person and not getting hit, then you're winning the match, basically. And we wear full gear, so we wear fencing masks with maybe you can see something in the background here.
Mm.
We wear fencing masks with like extra padding. We wear big padded jackets and heavy gloves and all that stuff. Usually you are fencing to the first hit. So after somebody is hit, the judges will call halt and you separate, and then the judges will decide who they think scored points. So it's usually not like a continuous kind of thing where you're
Mm.
just bashing away to each other. So that affects the tactical framework. If you're trying to compare this to like boxing or MMA, that's that might be a difference that might come into play.
So you could almost say it's kind of like fencing, but slower because of the equipment you have.
Um, I mean, I think it's pretty fast. It's
Okay.
yeah. I guess technically, like, I mean, there's the modern fencing weapons, they're very light. So yes, I guess you can say that it's slower, but it's not slow, right? It's
Gotcha.
it's still the time frame of like someone cutting with this is like faster than your reaction time, basically. So um, it's still a very fast sport. But I guess yes, it's technically slower than.
Nice. So I think it'll be interesting, even if you just, I know it's kind of different games, I guess it's hard to maybe extrapolate into other sports, but it might be interesting just to hear some examples of things that you're doing and maybe what you're looking to get out of some of these games within longsword fighting. And then that might just spur further conversation, maybe get some people's minds thinking of how it could be applied to other martial arts. But it'd just be interesting to kind of see, what you're kind of manipulating in these games to get what kind of outcomes.
Sure. Um, so there's a couple of different things that well, actually, yeah, before we talk about games, I do want to clarify one thing, which is
Yeah, go.
kind of a common misconception I see about the ecological approach,
Hmm.
which is a lot of people see it and think that it's equivalent to just like games. So they'll be like, oh, well, games, ecological approach is games, and we do a game sometimes, therefore we're doing it.
Or similar to positional work or something like that. They often
Yeah,
see it
yeah,
similar to that. Yeah.
right. Yeah. And I mean, like positional work can be ecological, but it depends on how you use it, right? So the ecological approach is a theory of perception and a theory of learning. So what you do, like what is ecological and what is not, depends on the goal. But it just so happens that games are very good at are a very good tool for executing the ecological approach in antagonistic like sports and martial arts. And the reason is because you need to set up a situation that represents whatever you're trying to do. And in order to do that, you need an opponent who's acting in a realistic way. And the best way to get someone acting in a realistic way is to make them actually be doing the thing for real. So just a little bit of background before, because I hear that a lot. I know you didn't ask that, but
No, perfect. That's
a
good.
lot of these ecological conversations, I hear that misconception. Oh, ecological, that means games. Well, no, not really.
Do you want
Not,
to
not
give an example of that then? So, okay, you mentioned obviously the outcome is what will make it ecological. So what would be the difference between I don't know examples in Longsword, but I'll give a quick example, maybe in like jujitsu or something, and you can relate something else. So if you're doing positional work like side control, one person's on top, one person's on the bottom of side control, and you're just doing positional work from there. And then what would make that ecological essentially?
Well, I mean, so that's just, I mean, you're just playing the game, right? At that point,
Mm.
you're just playing the game, but you're starting in a specific position. So you your students are going to get out of that, like whoever's doing that activity is going to get out of it whatever they would have gotten out of it playing the real game. So what what is their mindset, right? What is the mindset that you are encouraging during the class? What preceded this? Did you do a specific drill for a specific technique and, give them a bunch of prescriptive, this muscle has to move like this arm has to move there, and now they have that in their mind and that's exactly what they're trying to do? If that's the case, then, you know they're not going to be learning ecologically during that. If you are trying to get them to explore, you know the aspects of this position and, like, what they can and can't do, and, like, if you're encouraging exploration, then you're executing the ecological approach, if that makes
Gotcha.
sense.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned the mindset there, which is actually quite interesting because that doesn't often come up. H- How often do you play around with this as part of, say, your constraints-led approach to games? For example, maybe one person's being more aggressive, or one person's trying to, whatever it is. Is that something that you're often playing with in these different games constraints?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, this gets back to your original question of what exactly are we doing and what are we
Mm.
manipulating, which I did want to get back to. I didn't want to sound like
No, you're good.
I didn't want to make you think I was like dodging the question or anything, because I do want to talk about that.
Yep.
Um, so I guess, let's I'll give you an example of some games that we do. Okay. So some of the very highly constrained games. So some of the first games we give to beginners, one of them is called the direct attack game. So basically, you have two people, an attacker and a defender. Defender holds their sword down, attacker starts in shoulder guard, and they're both standing in one spot. Um, the attacker, their goal is simply to cut straight and hit the head. Okay. So they're not allowed to like feint and go to the other side. They have to go straight in. The defender's goal is simply to block the attack with their sword. Okay. So if the defender lands a hit, or sorry, if the attacker lands a hit, they step back and try again. Right. So now they're further away, it's going to be a little bit harder. If the defender blocks, the attacker gets closer and tries again. Okay. Um, so the purpose of this is you are, well, there's a couple purposes. One is to learn to attack. And in this case, so you can compare it to like a static drill where you can say like one person just stands there and the other person is hitting and the coach is giving them tips on how to hit better and, like, how to make their form better, right? So in this case, your coach is the fact that your opponent is blocking. Okay. So the fact that they're blocking means that you have to attack in such a way that, you can hit before they block, which means you have to go fast. You have to be efficient and get to your target quick. You have to um, eliminate any tells from your attack.
Gotcha.
Um, so ways that this can go wrong, right? What if somebody just can't hit? I think this is kind of maybe what you were getting at, right? So what do you do if somebody just can't hit and they're just getting closer and closer and closer and they just can't hit at all? Um, you have to, in that case, you have to intervene, right? You have to intervene as the coach and give them some tips. So there's a few possible reasons that this could be happening. Um, which you have to diagnose. Um, one big common one is people are moving their body in before they start, or they're forcing themselves to take a step with their foot. And if that's the case, then the person's going to see them. That's going to be a huge tell. The person's going to see them coming, and they're going to be able to block every time. So my tip for that is just say like, look, you don't have to step if you don't need to. If you can just reach them, then just reach them. And think of it as if this actually comes from a historical source. Think of it as if a string is attached to the tip of your sword and it's being pulled to your opponent's head. Just get it there as quickly as possible. Great. Um, so I'm not telling them any specific muscle movement. I'm not telling them to move any specific part of their body to extend their arms or, anything like that. It's all results based. So I'm giving tips based on outcomes. Um, so I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's it's just getting my mind running on kind of different things you're doing and what you're trying to get outcomes was. I think the audience will also start to see that. I guess the different outcomes you're trying to get from I guess to say a very simple game. That one, as you mentioned, for beginners. So then, how are you then progressing that? As they get better, or maybe as just like in terms of variation and things like that too.
Right. So that game, it's highly constrained. There's not very many options for either side.
Mm,
So it's pretty limited. And we don't really, it's also not very representative, right? So,
yeah.
being representative, it's an important, it's something we think about a lot in CLA because what you're doing has to, transfer over. And if it's not representative, it won't transfer as well. So this game's not as representative as it could be. So a few obvious limitations are, lack of movement is the big one, right? Both people are static. That's never going to happen when you're fencing. Um, Another one, obviously, you can only attack one way. The defender can only defend one way. So yes, there's a lot of limitations to this one. So we kind of um, use that one for the purpose of, you know, showing people, well, twofold. Actually, I said two things before. I only mentioned one. So the one thing is getting your attack going, right? The second one is that showing people or giving people an idea of the distance at which you can hit with a direct attack. And that is closer than a lot of people think. So if you're fencing and you're trying to hit someone, and you're doing it from too far away, then that's a recipe for frustration because you're never going to land a hit. You're going to get countered every time. So this kind of shows them that no, you actually have to be really close in order to land the hit. So they'll have realistic expectations when they fence. So regarding those limitations, so the next step up kind of is, in my view, is a game called Finnish Chicken. We call it that because it's a guy from Finland came up with it, and it's kind of like a game of chicken. So basically, two fencers start from a further distance, and they're both starting in the shoulder guard again. And they're not allowed to move backwards. They can only move forward, but they can, do whatever kind of step they want. They can, alter their patterns. They can jump. They can do whatever they want as long as they're moving forward. At any moment, either person can attack, and if they land their hit, then they win. And if they're blocked, then the person who blocks them wins. Okay. And either person can do that. There's not an attacker and a defender role. So this is still a highly constrained situation. You still have to go straight in. You're not allowed to do any feints or any weird stuff like that. But it adds A, footwork, and B, it adds like a mind game aspect, right? Because if you attack from too far away, then you're going to get blocked. But the closer you get, the more likely it is that your opponent is going to be able to hit you
Mm,
quickly. So that's a pretty, representative mind game of, actual fencing. That's going to come up a lot. And the idea of, you know, knowing when you're in distance and maybe creating a situation where you know you're in distance and your opponent doesn't, um, and executing on that, or forcing your opponent to attack before they're ready. So you're adding all these aspects, all these representative aspects that exist in the game, um, but it's still highly constrained. It's still missing a bunch of pieces. Um, but the idea is that, you know, everything. So you're not learning. You're not like learning footwork first. You're not saying like, okay, put your swords down. This is how you take a step. Okay, pick your swords up. Don't move. This is how you swing the sword, right? You're not learning each of them one by one. You're not like, oh, this is how you block. You're not learning each of them one by one. You're learning all of it at the same time. So we call this nonlinear pedagogy, right? Um, and it's you're just simplifying the game. So you're as opposed to breaking it down into pieces, you're simplifying it. And
Hmm.
yeah, so
I'm assuming as well when you're fighting against different size people as well, the range that your opponent has changes each time as well. So you've got more elements that are going into.
yes, yeah, that's definitely an aspect. And you know, you're doing this and you're switching partners. You're doing it with a bunch of different people. You're getting a lot of different perspectives, and everybody has their own strategies, and everybody is learning in their own way. And by doing that, you're getting variation. And you're learning, and some people are left-handed too, right?
Mm.
So if you're left-handed, then if you do this game right-handed, you're going to go straight in. But left-handed, now both swords are on the same side. So you kind of have to figure out how to, create a situation. And I have some people sometimes they're like, oh, should I switch to a right-handed stance to like make this work better? And I'm like, no, you definitely shouldn't, because that's not going to happen when you're fencing. No one's gonna, you know, no one's gonna put themselves at a disadvantage by switching their hands when you're fencing. You got to deal with it.
No, for sure. Yeah, and this is obviously you mentioned it's in a straight line. So in HEMA, you're not in a straight line, correct? You can still move around.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So is that kind of the next step on top of this kind of game you would go to?
Well, the not necessarily. Um, so offline footwork is definitely an aspect, but if you're talking about engaging at distance, right? So fencing happens at kind of a further distance than boxing or especially grappling. So you know I don't know very much about boxing. Um, I'm not going to pretend to either. Um, but I imagine that you know moving from side to side like can give you some advantage in some ways. In fencing, it's sometimes it can, but it's marginal, right? The further you are apart, the less good, the less stepping to the side is going to help you, because the other person can just,
Yeah.
just change. Now, when you're in close, stepping off definitely helps, and close game is definitely an aspect that we practice. But if we're talking about engaging from distance, then we tend not to focus too hard on offline movement, although it does come up sometimes. Um, so progression from there, like from above, finished chicken. So then um, once you once the game is less constrained, you kind of the world kind of opens up, because now it's like, okay, well, we can do sparring, but you can only go for thrusts maybe, or you can, this person has to start in this guard, the other person has to start in that guard. This person can only, you know, whatever. You give either side something to do, and what you choose for them to do depends on what you like, what skills you want to work on at that particular moment.
So what are the typical outcomes you're looking for? I guess in HEMA, because obviously you talked about like the range. You're trying to find the range. You're looking at kind of pairing everything with footwork. So what are some of the other outcomes you're looking at then and you're designing games around?
Interesting. Um, Good question. I feel like the answer to this is like the system, like a system of fencing. What is a system of fencing?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess more kind of like, so for example, uh, I think maybe just from my experience using this within, say, like rugby, like for sprinting, right? We'll use a constraint-led approach because we're trying to get an outcome of the foot landing on the ground from above. So we want that kind of hammer the nail down. So we'll use different things to kind of get that outcome. We want to be able to dissociate upper and lower body by doing different things because we want to be able to sprint and do other things. So we'll design things around those outcomes of speed for that sport. So I don't know if that helps at all frame the question any better.
It does, yeah. I see what you're saying. So, at the high level, the outcomes are results based. So, say we're working on thrusting, then the outcome we're looking for is the thrust lands, right? There's, secondary outcomes that are helpful but not necessary. Like, you know, if you thrust while if you land a thrust while the sword's bound up against your sword, maybe that'll be better in some situations. Or if you're doing it as in a certain timing or whatever. There's also there are some I want to I guess I don't want to use the word oh, what is it? Where something oh man, I forget this stupid CLA word for a thing that is constant whenever, you do a technique. So,
An attractor? Is that what you
no, it's a different
attractor?
one.
No. Oh, I don't know. I only know attractor. Attractor and now I forgot the other one. Attractor and jeez, now I can't remember the other one either.
It's doesn't matter.
But is that what you mean though? Like an
No,
attractor of a
no,
movement? No,
it's
different one.
just an aspect of a movement that happens whenever you do this movement. So basically, like a kinetic chain, right? So if you have, uh, if I'm doing a step, like if I'm doing a passing step, then there's a moment when the leg, the upper body, and well, the leg and the upper body are all in line. They're all in kind of like a like a diagonal line pushing forward. And if that's the case, then you're on the right track with your attack. And if you're not creating that, then there may be something that needs to be coached. Um, but again, like it's not 100% necessary because if they're getting the outcome, if they're landing the
Yeah,
hit, then I don't really care how if
how
they're
it
doing
looks.
this thing that I think should be correct. But there are certain things that are common that are commonly seen in a correct outcome. Right.
Gotcha. No,
So I
that
guess
makes sense.
those are the main things that I would be looking for. Invariance, that's the word. Invariance.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, mostly, I mean, the big one is just did they land the hit or did they not? Right? Did they defend themselves or did they not? If you're working on some kind of defensive thing. Um, yeah. We also this might be like maybe like anti-ecological. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But we're also trying to learn a historical fencing system at the same time. And it contains prescriptive techniques and we like there's a spare how where you go like that. And that's like a move that exists in this system. And it's really useful in modern fencing.
Mm.
But we sometimes go out of our way to like look at those types of techniques, even if one of them might not be the most useful for modern fencing, although we try to make them all as useful as possible. Because part of the appeal of longsword is that you are studying this old system that existed 500 years ago. Um, but that being said, we do try as hard as we can to produce, positive results for fencing. And yeah, a clean hit is the outcome we're looking for.
What do you see? Maybe I want to say I don't know how I'm going to frame this, but what do you see that is different from, say, the the best or better guys in the sport versus the ones that aren't so good? Is it just time in the sport, or are they able to pick up these games and stuff faster? Is the athleticism? Is there something that you've seen that maybe is a kind of like a trend for the better guys?
Good question. Um, I mean, this is going to be true of any training method, but like the better people are the ones who are more dedicated, the ones who are showing up to all the classes, the ones who are like asking questions, like working on, finding things to work on. Um, they're always going to, you know, be the people who um, turn out to be, better fencers. Um, as far as the games go, um, I guess I see creativity from the better people. They're more bought into the games, like they're really trying to win and really
Mm,
working hard to like figure out the game. So a lot of times a game, you set up these constraints and which are rules, right? They're the rules of the game. And sometimes you can kind of figure out like gaming the rules a lot of times is, you think of gaming the rules as being something negative, like, oh, you're compromising your principles to, do something that's not intended. But in the case of these games, a lot of times that is intended. Like you want to game the rules because you're trying to, you know, you're trying to be creative. You're trying to figure out the
mm.
best solution. So the people who, end up being better fencers sometimes game the rules more than others. Um,
Mm. I'm sure there's an aspect as well of guys along with that creative line that aren't scared to lose. I think a lot of people in different games as well, they like, the ego comes into play as like, I don't want this guy to get, whatever on me, so I'm just gonna play it safe essentially, and
yeah,
only do this one thing, and then you kind of lose the benefit of doing it where you can, because you're doing, maybe, I don't know, let's just say you're doing like 5 minute rounds, you've got 5 minutes to just try as much shit as possible and see what happens and what works.
yeah, that's a good, that's a good point. Um, yeah, not being afraid to lose. Yeah, because if you're afraid to lose, you're only going to do, like, you're going to limit yourself to what you
Mm,
think is going to be the best. So you're not going to be doing, you're not going to be trying to figure out new solutions. You're not going to be exploring your solution space, which is the point of the game.
mm,
Um, I also think that that's kind of a limitation of games. You hear about like, even Rob Gray talks about this as the 70% rule, right? So if you're coaching somebody, then you should be, whatever activity they're doing, you should set it up in such a way that they succeed 70% of the time.
mhm,
And if you're playing a game which is, you know, if it's a 50-50 chance for either side to win and both people are equal skill, then they're going to be winning 50% of the time, not 70% of the time. So, um, but it's a limitation that we kind of don't have a solution for. Um, but yeah, if you're not afraid to lose, then you're going to benefit more.
how much then, because of some of these maybe limitations of some of this game stuff, how much actual just open sparring then do you like to do?
A lot. So we'll start. We do a 2 hour session. We always start with sparring, and then do. Maybe we'll read from the source for a couple minutes, and then we'll do a couple games, and then we do more sparring at the end, along with maybe some judge matches. Um, so yes, we do a lot of sparring.
How do
Find
you
that to be
how
very
do you manage how do you manage the sparring in the beginning then? Obviously, is that part of kind of like, are you sparring lighter in the beginning, almost like as a warm up, and then are you just progressing it throughout the session? How's that look?
yeah. So yeah, the first sparring session is essentially a warm up, and if somebody feels that they would rather do like a static warm up on their own, then they're free to do that as well. But yeah, usually we start slow and then like build it up as we go. Um, and then by the time we get to the games, everybody is a um, you know should be loosened up, should be ready to go, and B, hopefully has been thinking about their sparring and thinking about what they want to work on for that session. Um, so that's kind of why I decided to start with sparring is so you can use that as an opportunity to think about what you want to work on. Be like, oh
Mm.
well, today, like when I got here, I didn't know what to do, but during that sparring session, I feel like I was having trouble parrying on this side or whatever. So maybe
That's
I'll
smart.
focus on that in my training today, or whatever.
No, I like that. Do you ever have to change, I guess, some of the games if you have two guys who are maybe really different skill levels? For example, I was talking to Josh Peacock a few weeks ago, and he gave some examples where, if someone can't do, if someone's too new and they don't have the skill level for the game, they'll just kind of regress the game right back for that person. They'll start maybe, like for example, in your range game, they might start closer than the other person starting further away. So I guess how are you managing that?
Yeah. Um, so that's another logistical difficulty because we are like, we're not a professional club. We're like a casual club that's ultimately like we produce people who, get deep in brackets and high level tournaments, but ultimately it's a hobby. It's a casual hobby. So we have people um, you know, of all skill levels in all of our classes. Um, and there's a couple of ways that the skill difference will go down like that. First of all, regarding what Josh Peacock said about sometimes someone just won't be able to do something. That does happen sometimes in fencing, but it's a lot less likely than in something like jiu-jitsu. So like in grappling, so I did judo, so like I didn't do very much. I did like a couple years, so like I'm not an expert, but I have practiced it. Um, in judo, if you are going up against somebody who's good and you're not good, then you have zero chance of doing anything ever. That person's gonna grab you and you will not be able to do anything.
You'll be on your ass.
Yeah, you're thrown. It's gonna happen. And you won't be able to throw them. Um, in fencing, it's a little bit different, right? So anybody can move around. Anybody can pick up a stick or like a sword or whatever and move around back and forth and swing that stick. So anybody can get lucky and like land a hit on someone who's good. Um, so that being said, um, they like any skill level can at least participate in any game. There's not going to be there's I mean unless someone has like an injury or something, there's
Yeah.
not going to be any physical barrier to participating in the game. Now, as far as skill difference goes, um, so one thing is with the direct attack game. I'll bring it back to that one. That game is kind of special because due to the fact that you're swinging like they're both static. When you swing and hit, you step back. So the more you hit, the harder it becomes for you. And the more you get blocked, the easier it becomes. And what that does is it basically self-scales the game. So either side can be any skill level. And it'll just be like if the attacker is a higher skill level, they'll be back further. And if they're a lower skill level, they'll be closer. But either way, both people should be winning about half the time. Um, if all games could be like that, then it would be awesome, perfect world. But unfortunately, that's not how it is. So
Mhm.
sometimes, there'll be a big skill difference. So maybe the higher skill person has to like go a little bit easier, which is not ideal for training. But again, casual club limitations. That's what
Yeah.
we do sometimes. And then sometimes we just separate the class into groups based on skill level. That's something we've been doing more recently, and that just allows everybody to get more meaningful reps with each other.
Oh, I like that. That's really good. For someone who's listening to this and maybe wants to kind of learn more as well, do you have any books or resources that you recommend?
Um, like that I produced or just in general?
Just in general? Or if you have you produced anything?
Well, me and a few other uh, Longsword coaches have this website called Game Design for HEMA. So that's gd4h.org. And we have a bunch of articles up there, um, mostly about CLA and the ecological approach and applying it to teaching HEMA. Um, Sources that I have found useful are so Rob Gray, the Perception and Action podcast, and he has 3 books. Um, How We Learn to Move was his first one, and then Learning to Optimize Movement, and then Learning to Be an Ecological Coach. So if you really want to get into um, CLA and the ecological approach and apply it to coaching, then those I think are kind of the gold standard on you know at least digestible sources, right? You can go academic, right? You can look up, studies and papers and that kind of stuff, and that's going to dive you deeper into the rabbit hole. But for getting into it, I would definitely recommend those.
Nice. I'm gonna link. I'll link your site in the description too for listeners. But one more question to finish this out too. That is kind of unrelated, but are you familiar with the melee or the melee fighting championship?
I
It
think so.
is. It is probably something that you're sitting there and you're probably like, "Fuck that! This has nothing to do with this." It's basically like 5-on-5 dudes in medieval armor and in a wooden octagon beating the shit out of each other with weapons. I don't know if that's if you've heard of that or seen that before.
So I've heard of like Battle of Nations or like Bovert. I have heard of, which is that, and like the scoring condition is like if you get knocked off your feet, you're out, and
Yeah, I think so.
last team with somebody on their feet wins. Is this
Yeah,
different from that, or
I think it's the same thing.
okay?
I guess here in Austin, it's that they have like their own championship that they do at different events, and
Okay.
dude, it's crazy, man. Obviously, I don't think there's any actual skill component other than just trying to bash the other dude with something heavy.
Yeah. Well, I've thought about it. I mean, it's about like the scoring condition. Yeah, I have watched this. I've thought about it. I haven't participated in it. I would be too scared to, but it does like the strategy is like do interest me, and I feel like a team of like American football players would probably do pretty well. And
Well, that's the thing. You don't even have to use weapon. You can use your weapon, or you can just kick people out
yeah,
of the bloody thing.
yeah,
You can do anything.
yeah,
It's like that was
yeah.
crazy.
Or like a team of like really good judo or sumo players probably would.
Yeah, it's a crazy game out. I watched it live. It was like a fitness festival here, and I was like, "What the hell is going on?" Dude's fully armored out, like chainmail, metal, everything, like actual, like that was, and they'll smash each other on the head with these things. You're like, bro, I'm pretty sure that's like concussion central going on right now in there. And dude's just like after one round, like the helmet's off, to like lying there dead. And I was like, man, like I don't know, that's crazy to get into that, but I'm assuming that's more a brutish version of HEMA, where HEMA actually has some kind of skill and technical tactical elements to it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I will never say anything bad about Boger. I think it's really cool. Again, I wouldn't do it myself, and honestly, like, so Gila people can sometimes be a little bit like snobby about like, oh, we do the historical way. We study like historical books. But like if
Yeah.
you look at what knights were actually doing for training, like a knightly tournament was a lot closer to that, the Bover, people
Mm,
smashing each other with in armor
yeah.
than like whatever we're doing like with these swords and like fencings. Like which one is really more historical? I don't know.
Yeah,
I
true.
really, as me personally, I like the skill. I like the skills that are, that fencing produces. I like the approach and, the strategy of like, all right, what am I gonna, I'm gonna block and go like that, and I'm gonna, set up my hit and land it, and then, that's the skill that I am interested in that I think is cool.
No, I love that. Yeah, this is a super interesting chat too. It's really cool to go into some of the examples you had with games and etc. And kind of your explanation around everything. But if people want to find you and follow you, Steve, is gd4h.org the only place, or you got some more places where people can keep up with what you're doing?
Um, I have a YouTube channel called Overanalyzing Longsword. That I post sometimes. I post like longsword analysis sometimes. I don't really have like Instagram or Facebook or anything, but yeah.
Sweet. Now it's all good. I'll link that up in the description as well. So, well, man, somebody's got a lot of views. I didn't realize HEMA was this popular. You got like 1.2, 1.3K views on some of these little breakdowns. That's sweet.
Yeah, it's I mean it's not widely popular, but we have kind of a core group that like people who are interested in HEMA, seek this kind of stuff out.
Do you have maybe like at least Olympic fencers that come over to this maybe when they stop competing in fencing and things like that, or is this just
Sometimes.
too far removed? Sometimes.
Yeah. A lot of like, especially the high level competitors, most of them have some kind of background in something. Like I have as I mentioned before, I have a background in kendo.
Mm,
Um, a lot of them came from, modern Olympic fencing. Um, some people are, I guess like natural trained, um, HEMA,
killers.
yeah, killers, yeah. But, and I feel like that's how it is in like everything too. Like you always have your
Mm,
background, right? You have whatever sport you practiced in middle school and high school and
yeah.
whatever. But yeah.
Do you find certain backgrounds lend themselves better to HEMA than others?
Um, yeah, I mean, modern fencing definitely doesn't hurt.
Mm,
Um, yeah, it's definitely very helpful, especially if you're a high level modern fencer, because you have all that, even if the blade work isn't 100% the same, you have that sense of distance. Like the length of the
mm,
weapons is similar, so you have that sense of distance. You have that ability to manipulate people. You have like the mind games, all ready to go. You just have to like
mm,
adapt some things. For me, coming from kendo, the close game was the biggest adaptation that I needed to make because kendo doesn't really have a close game. Like when you get close, you kind of just, you know, separate. But in longsword, like once you get close, you can do close in cuts, you can grapple, you can, push. There's a lot going on there.
oh, sweet. I might have to watch a couple of these later tonight or tomorrow just to see what's going on. But I appreciate you coming on, Stephen, and sharing everything. And we'll catch up soon.
Sure, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it a lot.